to the first of our National Discovery Series in 2025. So this is number 1 of the rank that brings global thought leaders in coaching to ignite our thinking. So in today's session, AI in coaching, friend or foe, we'll be focusing on the role, as you've heard us just generally talking AI in coaching, and explore the question of whether AI is our partner or our competitor. The way that we're going to run this session is Jonathan's going to present for the next hour. There will be a Q&A at the 20-minute mark and a Q&A 10 minutes before 6 o'clock in Brisbane time. So what I would like to suggest is that you note your questions in the chat function, because you will be all muted, and we'll give the opportunity, we'll address the chat function. I will do that. And alternatively, if you particularly want to ask the question verbally, please feel free to put your hand up in your screen. Okay, so if there are any particular urgent functions or questions you have, Inga Kelly, she's at the, if you want to put your hand up there, Inga. She's running the technology, and you could just directly ask her a question if you're having any issues. At 6 o'clock, Jonathan will excuse himself. He's going off to present at a 200 people attended conference. So we're very tiny compared to what you're going to go there. And we will then run a debriefing session on what Jonathan's spoken about. So very briefly, just welcome Professor Jonathan Passmore, who's a UK-based chartered psychologist and a globally recognized accredited coach and supervisor, who's ranked among the top 10 professional coaches worldwide. And his current research interests include AI and coaching, digital coaching, which he's going to talk a bit about today as well, the potential and risks of coach bots, diversity, coaching ethics, and coaching impact and evaluation. He's very well published, Jonathan, and his recent book is the Digital and AI Coaches Handbook. So welcome, Jonathan. We're very privileged to have you here today. Thank you for making the time in your very busy schedule. And so I'd like to hand over to you, and I will pause you at 20 minutes so we can have some Q&A. So over to you, Jonathan.
Thank you very much indeed, Vicky, and colleagues, welcome. It's really lovely to connect with you. I noticed Olivia put in chat, small but mighty. I don't know whether she was referring to us as a group or a reference to me individually. Colleagues sometimes see me and they meet me at events, because I've done a lot of online. I think this is now more than 350 virtual events that I've done in the last 10 years. And so then they meet me in person. I'm here in Singapore for a real event, and people come and go, but Jonathan, you look so much taller on Zoom. So I'm pretty short. Anyway, I'm going to talk about 20 minutes on digital and really the journey that we've had over the last years into where we are in the coaching industry. Then we'll have a bit of a chat about digital and the implications for that, and where you see your personal development as executive coaches moving into, recognizing that changing market and how you position yourself. Then I thought we'll have another 20 minutes talking about AI, potential existential threat that AI might be bringing to us, and whether we can see AI more as a friend or a foe. I sometimes talk about AI being the car engine, and we are horse and cart drivers. I sometimes talk about AI being the implications for if we were blacksmiths and the engine has come, what are the implications for blacksmiths, and what would they need to be faced with in a world that was going to have the motor car happening to them? Or what should they be doing? And so the implications for us. So we'll explore some of those ideas anyway over the next hour together. And as I say, I'm really in a great big shed. Really, you can't see behind me, but it's a very busy environment. So please excuse me that there is little bits of background noise that happen. It is me, it is my fault, but I can't control that because there's a crowd of 200 people in this building. It's a very big building and tucked away in a corner, but sometimes they get excited and they clap and cheer because they're at an event. So without further ado, let me share my screen and we will dive into our session together. So let me start our journey. Just going to close that down like that. Okay. So if you want to connect, first thing that I always say is I'm on LinkedIn. I post a lot of my research and writing for free on LinkedIn. So if you want to connect, you just grab your smartphone, click on the QR code, and you could connect with me on LinkedIn. If you don't have that to hand, then just search for me on LinkedIn, connect. Happy to have conversations with you, but also you'll be up to date as I publish papers, and some of the papers that I'm going to talk about today are in the process of review. Some of them are in the process of still analysis, because the journey for a piece of research from the idea to it actually appearing is often 2 years. It can be a very slow process. And as a result of that, I might talk about things that might not appear for 3 or 6 or 9 months. So when they do appear, I post them on LinkedIn and you can be up to speed with these. So let us start our journey. As Vicky said, I've written a number of books over the years. The latest is this digital and AI book. That came out in October. And many of the things I'm going to talk about now do link into that book, but many of them don't, because the whole pace of research is moving so quickly. And this book is part of a series that I'm doing with Routledge and some of the other ones. And you might have known me from back in 2005. In the UK, Catherine Tolper and I, in a very early AC event in London, met, and that led to Excellence in Coaching, and then a whole series of books that I did with colleagues at the Association for Coaching. I think 6 books in total that ended with Mastery in Coaching. Maybe that was in 2012. So you might have come across my name over that period of time. So let's start by thinking about coaching in context. And we often think that coaching is something new, that we're doing something amazing and special and it's never been done before. But I've tried to challenge that notion over the last decades and suggested that coaching probably is not something that is new, that instead we as humans have been probably doing it for more than 10,000 years. And we were probably using a conversational approach to help people to learn when we were hunter-gatherers. And it was an intergenerational learning tool. So average expectancy for life was probably 30. You needed to train the youngsters quickly, but you also needed to train them in a different way than we might think about training in the 1950s or 1960s. To training in that environment, which was a highly dynamic environment, changes in season, but also you're moving from valley to valley, from area to area. You couldn't say, go outside to the apple tree, pick the apples, bring them in, because the apple tree might not be in this valley. There may not be apples because it's a different season. Maybe actually the climate was changing and you were in a different area where you were further north or south or east or west, where there were different fruits that you needed to look for, different animals. So what you were looking for were criteria. And coaching is a fantastic learning tool, as we know, for helping people in dynamic environments, great for helping people to think for themselves, to really step up and take personal responsibility, to enable them to be more self-aware, to manage the risks of the environment that they're operating within. So it's a hypothesis that probably our ancestors were using questions, we're using listening, we're using summaries, reflections, and affirmations, all the things that we do in coaching, to help people become more self-aware and to take more personal responsibility to survive. And this peopleization, this intergenerational learning tool, really only became formalized with the Greeks and Socrates. So those hunter-gatherers didn't go into the caves when they painted their hands and do a painting of the grow model. They didn't leave that behind for us. But Socrates, through Plato, did leave behind this idea of questioning as a style of learning. Exploration, in his case, about what the nature of society was. What was democracy? What were the negatives and positives of a democratic institutions, and how you hold leaders to account? What are the values that might guide us as citizens in these sorts of societies that we want to create? So a purpose, a sort of formalized learning approach that Socrates was using as he wandered through the streets of Athens. And then really it was the 1980s and 1990s that coaching really started to come about, training and accreditation, organizations like the Association for Coaching, but also the EMCC, the ICF, and many others, British Psychological Society, special group in coaching psychology, all came about in really that period, 20-year or so period from 1980 through to 2000, offering accreditation, training, and competency frameworks. We were professionalizing coaching. Socrates would not have described himself as a coach. That wasn't his identity. But as we've professionalized coaching through these 1980s through 2020, we professionalized it and we adopted that identity of what it is to be a coach. I am a coach. But we are now in a world of rapid change, a productization. Now, here I am at an Ezra coaching event here in Asia. We have hundreds of clients and tens of thousands of individual coaches going through our programs each year. And we're leveraging science, psychology, and technology, digital platforms to bring coaching at scale to organizations that might buy 10,000 managers coaching in a single year. So it's become a product that they can say, we want to buy this because we've got a consistency about it and we can scale that. So that has been changing in the industry, and I can happily talk a little bit more around this. So it's bringing it not just from the elites that were able to access it when I started coaching in the late 1990s to thousands and tens of thousands of middle managers and contributors in organizations. But change hasn't stopped yet. As we're moving through towards the 2030s, there is the potential for coaching can become truly democratized. A democracy isn't just when white men who are property owners have the ability to vote. And in a way, that's what productization has done. It is leaders and managers, it's white collar workers who have had access to that, predominantly in large organizations. And democratization is about everyone having access. And I can see the power that AI technologies potentially have to move coaching from maybe 1 million people or 3 million people who probably have access at the moment in the world to coaching to 3 billion people. People who might be a mum who's in Sudan who would love a coaching conversation to think about how she helps her son or copes with the pressures of being a parent. Maybe to an Ethiopian shopkeeper as they think about how they position their products and their pricing in response to changing market dynamics, who might not be able to afford a human coach, but an AI coach may be a solution for them through their smartphone, access 2 o'clock in the morning or whenever they need it, 365 around the clock, around the world. So I think the coaching industry is old and is also dynamic enough to change and to give us a future as coaches in contributing towards where it's going. So when I look at the general market, I can see some changes. We can see individual coaches, sole traders. I still do executive coaching. And when I started in the 90s and early 2000s, I was working at PwC. We were a small scale provider. When I moved to a company called OPM in London, I had a team of about 30 coaches, but we were predominantly working in London or certainly within England. We weren't crossing national boundaries. We were in a localized geographical area. And there are many who are still providing those personalized human, I might describe them as white glove services these days, a very personalized approach for individuals and organizations. There is also the emergence, of course, of digital platforms. Here are a list of some of them. There are many others. Every time I talk to somebody, there's another one that is popping up. The pace of the growth of the digital platforms has slowed, and instead what's taking over from that now is the proliferation of AI coach bots. So here are a few of those. These are not the only ones, as we've already heard on this call. You probably can't go to a coach meeting without meeting somebody who is involved with the development of a new coach bot. And this is typical of an immature market, that there are many, many people starting the race. Who's going to win the race still needs to be determined. It's clearly going to depend on scale and size and financial strength, but also sometimes a dark horse emerges. Who would have imagined OpenAI would have become a multi-billion company when actually you might have favored Google to come up with this, or Meta, or somebody else? And they are playing in that market, but they're certainly not the market leaders when we come to Gen AI products. And then coaching software. We've seen a number of providers that can help us either with learning and development, coaching.com, Delenta. I'm involved with another called BCC, becoming a credentialed coach, and Optify is another example of these that provide platforms for us to connect or ways of learning and engaging digitally. So the market is becoming more mature, and as it matures, we see a greater segmentation. So there's an interesting paper that you might be thinking about or have already previously read, which is called Digital Coaching, and we looked at what it was to be involved in the digital coaching space. And a colleague of mine, Sandra Diller, and I explored this by interviewing coaches, gathered some data, and tried to formalize a definition, because the term digital coaching had not been widely accepted. We had online, distance, e-coaching, many different terms and many different definitions. And so this makes it very hard to research, very hard to write about if people are writing about similar but different things, using similar but different words. So for Sandra and I, we were saying it's synchronous. It's a personal conversation. It's using digital enabled audio and video technology. So it's different from phone coaching. And they are a connection between a human coach and a human coachee, with the purpose of empowering the coachee in their self-development. So of course we can use a variety of words: productivity, well-being, etc., personal insights, goal attainment, but self-development is how we choose to conceptualize this in this definition. So that's really what I'm talking about when I'm referring to digital coaching. Now, some of you might have even participated in this research study, which I'm going to share the next 3 slides is about. And these are the results from a survey that we did about 18 months ago. The report is published on the Henley Business School website. So if you put trends in digital and AI coaching, Henley Business School, Jonathan Passmore, there's a free download to access. It's also on my personal website, jonathanpassmore.com. So is hundreds of other papers and technical reports. So if you ever can't sleep at night and you're thinking, oh gosh, what do? I could look at my screen. We know blue screens are terrible for you. You could download a copy of that, print it out, sit there in bed and read a research report, which probably 2 pages in, you'll be ready to sleep. Here is some of the data on our from that digital and AI trends. We asked people about modalities, which they were using for digital delivery. So a lot of people said, yeah, we are using video calls. About 20%, so about 15% of them saying we are on platforms for the delivery. And many people were answering yes to platforms, and, or surprisingly, they had platforms for some of their use, Zoom, Teams, Google, etc., for some of their other use. A smaller number of people had their own platform, their own white labeled versions that are available from people like Delenta. And a tiny number, to our surprise, were using Meet VR. So 4 out of over 500 participants. So we're talking of less than 1% of people, surprisingly, are stepping into the metaverse for coaching conversations. 10% were using phone, and still a significant number were meeting face-to-face. I think that number continues to decline. And many people, while they recognize there is something magical about meeting people face-to-face, and we've seen a growth in outdoor coaching, and I know the AC has an outdoor coaching conference. I'm currently working on a new book on outdoor coaching, certainly doing some research and writing there. I've got my 3rd paper that's coming to conclusion there. That's certainly taking off and moving into the natural environment. Meeting people face-to-face has a different dynamic than meeting them virtually. So some of the others I've got listed there, I'm not going to go and describe those, but you can see a broad balance as this survey was carried out. This was 2022 data. Report was published in 2023. So we're looking 2.5 years ago. And I think the trend is towards more online, but still holding a value of face-to-face. What platforms were people using? So we asked people in relation to this. Not surprisingly, Zoom was dominant. You have your own views probably about those, whether you like Google Meets or Hangout, as it's sometimes called, or you prefer Microsoft Teams. My own experience is that Zoom seems to be able to, as a self-standing platform and a specialist, maintain the quality of the call, and is a nice, easy platform to use. But you might have your own preferences. I quite often use Google Meet, but I'm also happy on Zoom, and I've used some of the others as well. In fact, I know some of the digital platforms have said we invented digital coaching, but most of us who've been around a while will know Actually, we were using Skype back in about 2012. So even though those firms didn't actually come into formation till about 17, 18, 19, they're making up the idea that they've invented digital coaching, because many of us were actually on some of these platforms as part of the work that we were doing back then. And when we asked people about digital tools, what we were surprised with is how low the take up was. So around about half of the people were using something. Most of those people were using a whiteboard, so about 150. What I've seen more recently is transcription tools are growing in popularity. Menti surprisingly isn't, as a sort of polling tool. And what was slightly disappointing, and I used to use it a lot in my practice, sort of whiteboard, yes, but also bring other things along like constellations or strengths cards. And the take up of these is still relatively limited. So I think there's real potential for us as coaches who work in digital spaces to add to the work that we're doing and enhance the experience for our client by using some digital tools and incorporating those to give it a more interactive personal feel, not just a conversational aspect to it, not just being voice driven. Now, the other thing that I think has been changing that we talked about, this is a paper with Woody Woodward, I think we published in 2023, on the future of coach education. And our suggestion was that coach education still remains largely based on face-to-face conversations. And if the market is significantly shifting towards digital, shouldn't we be thinking that half of coach education take that into account? Given the growth of AI, how is AI being built into coaching programs? So I'm just working with two colleagues at the moment, one in BCC and another Sam Isaacson. And in both of those programs, we've developed, or I've supported them in the development of AI and digital programs to equip coaches with the skills. So if you type in BCC, coaching Jonathan Passable, you'll probably be able to find this program. And the other is Sam Isaacson, if you're interested in following those up. The second thing that we said in this paper was the coaching industry itself is going to fragment. So in the past, maybe still even at the present, that most people work as coaches. But what I'm seeing is an increasing trend for coaching services, customer service roles in places like Ezra and BetterUp and Coach Hub and You Accelerate. So they need people who understand coaching, people like us, to run their coaching services, recruiting coaches, supervising coaches, managing and monitoring, training and developing. All of that, as well as explaining to clients in sales roles, what does coaching really mean? How do you deploy it? How do you build a coaching culture? Coaches are best placed to do that. If you are just a salesperson, you're selling widgets. If you're a coach, you can have authentic, genuine, evidence-based conversations to really help clients optimize the value of coaching interventions. And then the other side that I've seen are in relation to innovation, product, and behavioral science. So half of my week, as I say, I spend at Ezra. I'm at an Ezra event now, and here much of my job is trying to use that research and evidence to inform innovation and products. What's the science telling us? How can that inform the way that new products are developed? How can we help clients to get the best value from the money they're spending? And that's based on a long-term view of not just making one purchase and great, they go away. But if you're a multi-million-pound organization, what you want is to create in clients a real understanding about building a coaching culture. So there's a desire to use coaching alongside training, alongside mentoring, alongside other interventions as part of the HR strategy. So there are roles inside organizations, inside digital organizations, inside coaching, sales, customer services roles that as coaches we can start to think about as we want to blend and build more portfolio-based careers. So the final bit in this, sometimes people ask me, well, I'm a coach. Should I look at a digital platform? And I say, well, you know, the choice is yours. Rates are lower than many of us might want to charge. But for some people, it's a nice way of blending their own personal work to increase the number of hours, maybe grow their experience. For novice coaches early in their career, it can be a really useful intervention. And it depends on what an individual coach wants. So I put 10 questions to ask if you were looking around for digital platforms, which one should you choose? Because I would encourage you to be highly selective. And you might ask some of these questions, or all of them. You might ask yourself, well, Why do you want to coach online? Maybe you don't have an extensive black book. Maybe you don't have a big network. So you get to coach at many of these organizations, the Googles, the Coca-Colas, the Pepsis, the Microsofts, the sort of brands that you would love to have on your CV. That might be an attraction, and it might give you access to more senior people. If you've got an extensive black book, maybe you don't need that. You might be interested in growing your hours more quickly. You might have 10 or 20 clients a week, but you think, actually, I've got capacity for 20 or 30 clients a week. You might want to optimize your income. So I certainly know some people who coach for 40 hours a week. They might have 10 or 20 hours of coaching from their own business, and they might have then 20 plus hours from a digital coaching business. And a group of people then say, do you know what? I have trained as a coach. The thing I love is coaching, and the thing I hate is marketing, admin, and sending in proposals. So the good thing about platforms is they do all of that for you. The trade-off is, well, you get a lower hourly rate because actually we can't bill for writing the proposal and all the ones you lose. Well, I've lost quite a few over the years, and as a coach, often billing for a whole team, I might write 3 or 4 proposals to win one for a team of 12 or 15 coaches. It just goes with the territory. You build it into your pricing. And it's the same with admin. You'll do 1 hour of coaching or 2 hours of coaching or 3 hours. And then there's 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 60 minutes of admin time of producing the invoice, chasing the invoice, telling them your bank details, getting set up on their procurement process, all the stuff that we have to do. That disappears if you're on a platform. But again, some people like that variety. So it's being clear why you would want to do this. Number 2, what criteria do they use to select? Number 3, how much do they pay? And are you happy with the rates? The rates vary in different organizations. If you're more of an executive coach, you get paid a higher rate than if you've got a more focused portfolio. How much work are they going to give you? I certainly know some platforms that just want the largest number of coaches, and coaches complain to me they get no work from them. Other people say that they're guaranteed a certain number of hours, or they're likely to find themselves with a certain number of hours, and that may be too many. So again, how much work are you looking for? I might encourage you to ask them about CPD, what training, what supervision, what support around the clock. What happens if it's 7:30 in the evening, your time, and the client says to you, I've just lost my job. I know this is our 4th coaching session, but I won't be able to have any more. I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't pay the mortgage. My partner's going to leave me. I think I am going to step out onto the balcony and throw myself off. And by the way, I'm on the 42nd story. What do you do in that situation? How do you get help? Who supports you in that? These things rarely happen, but having support, having a supervisor who you can reach out to. So one of the things I do, and I've encouraged my colleagues here to do, is to make sure that we provide that sort of support, that we're able to give individuals 365 support. So my supervisees have a 999 number, a 911 number. I don't know wherever you are in the world, but an emergency risk to life or limb telephone number that they can reach out to me if there is a real crisis that is happening. And I think that is important for any provider that you've got that support. And of course, if you're alone, you need to put that supervision in place for yourself. If you're on a platform, check the platform has that. What do other people say about it? Go offline and look at coaches who are advertising that they're on that platform. What do they say? Have a chat with them. Talk to more than one. Talk to 3 or 4 of them and get the inside scoop. There will be definitely good things about all platforms, and there'll definitely be bad things. Understand what the bad things are and whether you can live with them. Of course, trying to make sure you cross-reference those, because one person's attitude about, oh, the technology never connects, maybe it's on their side. You talk to 3 other people and say technology works perfectly. So just don't have one data point, cross-reference it with others, but take a view about the experience of coaches being there. What do you want to work for? Do you want to do one-to-one work or one-to-many? Different platforms offer different things. What's their approach to AI coach bots? Are they recording your conversations and feeding that AI into their AI tool? What does it say in their contracts? Now, we know that some platforms are doing this. I won't say, but there are some platforms who are recording the calls and are using that to train their AI bots. Be cautious, be careful, understand what you're committing to. If you're happy with that, and as long as it's fully transparent, I don't have a problem. But it's transparency for me that's the ethical aspect that the provider and the coach need to agree. And can you opt out of those? So if you are appointed, can you say, no, please don't record my calls? That's good. And then understanding which organizations they're working with. They might be working with very small ones similar to you. So some platforms have got quite small clients. Some of the bigger platforms have probably got some amazing clients that all of us will be delighted to see on our CV. So those might be some questions that might guide your thinking if you were contemplating stepping into adding a digital platform to the work that you're doing. But then again, it may or may not be relevant to you. So let's how have I done for time? Terribly badly. Vicky, haven't I? I've completely overrun into my 10 minutes of conversation, but let's have 5 minutes and then let's move into the second
Yes, that's
part.
fine. So there's a few on the chat. The one here from Tyler, what is the risk to coaching as a profession if a huge number of coaches are instantly available and virtually anyone can call them as a coach, when customer requirements for immediate service and cheap prices often trump the requirements for quality and integrity?
Not all clients are immature, but the market still remains relatively immature, and some buyers are naive, so they don't know the quality of what they're buying. Some of us will still go to, and I won't mention names, shops where you can buy t-shirts for $2. Not surprisingly, that a $2 t-shirt might not hold its shape very long. Secondly, the color might well wash out because it's not very good quality. And thirdly, the people who made those t-shirts may well be sitting in a locked building and are not being paid anything or very much at all. So the rights of the workers might be very poor. And there are some people who will buy the $2 t-shirts. So others might say, no, I know what's going on behind the scenes. It's not part of the advert. We employ cheap labor. This t-shirt will change from being a dark blue to being a light blue color as soon as you wash it once. And by the way, don't expect to wash it more than 3 times because it will fall apart. They don't advertise that bit. We sort of know it. It's disposable clothing. And many of us will buy something in the middle from a medium-sized retailer. But there are some people, if you're King Charles or you are an ultra-rich individual, maybe the chief executive of a business, you might have your clothing made to measure. So there are different buyers in the market, and some buyers will be highly knowledgeable and experienced to know what they're buying and will make their choice based on quality as well as price. And some people will just choose at the top end because they want a personalized, tailored service. I think we are at peak coach. And what do I mean by peak coach? I think we've now got enough coaches in the world, human coaches in the world, to meet the needs of humans that can afford it. My estimate is that we're somewhere in the region of 100,000 plus accredited coaches. We've also got probably another 50,000 coaches who are experienced, maybe trained in related fields, and are marketing themselves or marketing a product of coaching alongside training and other things that they do. We might poo-poo them. We might say, oh, but they're not real coaches. Well, 40 years ago, many of us weren't real coaches. We weren't accredited back in, let's say, 1995, but we were doing this stuff. And some of them do a really good job. Some of them do a better job than some accredited coaches, but they're out there. So that's 150,000 people. How many people can afford coaching? Well, there might be 10 billion people in the world, but not 10 billion people who can afford the price point that human coaches can work for. So we're currently at, if you work at a digital platform, somewhere between $60 and $80 an hour. And where could that price point go down before everybody stops working? You know, what's the rate for a taxi driver? Maybe a taxi driver is being paid $30 an hour. So much below $30 an hour, probably humans are not interested in doing that work. They could do other things. Maybe they're not quite as rewarding. But if you're thinking about new people into the profession, that's probably the cutoff point. So as more and more coaches come in, what happens is the prices continue to drop. When I started in the 1990s, the price for coaching was somewhere in the region of 10 to 20 times the price point that it is now. So we have fallen significantly, not 10 to 20 times, sorry. We are at, what are we now, 30? Yeah, I would say 10 to 20 times. If we, so we have a massive reduction in 30 years. And of course, inflation has also further eroded that. So we're likely to see, in my opinion, I'm afraid to say, the average coach rate continue to fall, but there is a bottom to the market. and before people start to do other things. So I think we're at about the right price point, the right market size, and we don't really need 2 more human coaches. We just need to ensure that we continue doing what we're doing, because the market will become less and less attractive for us and others, and people will drop away and become taxi drivers or do something else in terms of their psychological or HR skills. So I'm not sure that answers your question. And AI clearly is going to come in at the bottom end of the market and is going to be $5 or $10 a month.
Yeah. But just one question, and then we can move on, Jonathan. This is from Olivia, where she talks about, you've talked about some of the key challenges, things like rates and potential technological issues for people using platforms. Is there anything else, just from your experience, that you've noticed has been challenged for coaches considering platforms?
Yeah, I think making it work for you and not being driven by the platform. So there is, people sometimes talk about Uberization of coaching, and there has been a view that some of the digitally mapped taxi companies have not treated their employees very well. I think we should see ourselves, and we would want others, whether you're making a t-shirt, driving a taxi, or working as a coach, to be treated with courtesy and respect, to be trained, to have benefits, to learn and grow and develop. And if you find that whoever you're working for, whether it's as a taxi driver or as a coach or anywhere else, you're not treated in that way, I would encourage you to get on your horse and ride out of town.
Okay, so perhaps we could move on and talk about, I think the second part was around AI. And
Absolutely.
I know everyone's very interested in that, so we'll leave you to carry on with that. Thank you.
Let's dive in. So always, as an academic, I like to start with the definition. So here is a definition of AI coaching. Slides are going to be made available to you, so I can certainly send them to you, Olivia, and people can have access to these. All I would ask you is you don't distribute them to other people, so treat them as your own piece of content. Don't post them online, because it takes a long time to write a presentation. If all the content appears online, it frustrates, irritates, and annoys me, and then I will track you down on LinkedIn. No, I won't really. Synchronous coaching experience, where the machine replaces the role of the human, facilitating human client in goal setting, issue exploration, personal reflection, developing insights and actions. So in other words, what we're saying is it's a swap out, human coach disappears and a machine replaces the human, but it's a synchronous conversation. So there have been AI tools in the past, script-based, that have been asynchronous. Here we're talking about in the moment. And then really the coach bots Gen 1, as I've called them, were either asynchronous or very slow. Gen 2 has been still quite slow and has not been able to fully keep pace with a real human conversation. But as we step into Gen 3, that's beginning to appear now, and I'll talk about some of these, then the pace of response is more human-like, but we still need to see developments there. First thing I want to talk about is a systematic literature review. So what's the research telling us? If you're interested in this paper, you can click on the QR codes. I've got quite a few QR codes here. So you can click on these and link through to these studies and read them, download them yourself. So we just published one on AI. We've got a digital coaching one, which is still in review, but I'm hoping should be coming out in the next 6 to 8 weeks. But this particular one is out at the moment. What we found is a limited number of studies, 16, and there were some themes that emerged from these. Broadly, the themes were telling us that coaching works, but there are some ethical considerations. Let me just tell you what those ethical considerations were. I think they might be on the next slide. There are issues about confidentiality and privacy. There are issues about how AI was using our data. There were question marks about IP. And most of the studies that have been done looking at the impacts of AI coaching tools have been done with students. And there are some, in my view, question marks about whether we can generalize the results from student populations to the world of work. And I would say, I'd go further and say, probably we can't. So even though some of these studies have positive effects and make very strong and bold claims, there are 2 problems. One is most of the studies are done by the organizations who have developed the AI coaching tool. So there's a risk of bias. And the second one is students. So students might have different expectations or work in different ways to the challenges that leaders and managers bring to coaching conversations. So have a read of this paper if that's of interest. So what we're broadly saying is it's happening, small number of studies. We need more research. So it was good to have someone on the call today who themselves is going to be contributing to building the literature here. But much of our work started back in 2022. In fact, we had ChatGPT appear in the November, and I thought, wow, this is fantastic. So I spent my 2022 Christmas testing it out, and that was 3.5. And then, of course, within a month or 2 or 3 in the early part of 2023, they brought out version 4. So we had to rerun the tests. And broadly, we set out a number of hypotheses exploring coaching. We looked at the ICF Code of Ethics and asked it to write an essay about that. We asked it to write an essay about coaching research. And we asked it to review some other things that were quite common for our work that we were doing at Henley Business School. So how could it really help students, and what was the risks that we might be facing, and what were the risks that students might be facing? Again, you can click on the QR code and gain access to this paper. What we broadly found was that it was very easy for ChatGPT to produce content, but that content wasn't always reliable. So what has become termed hallucinations. And one of the funny things, or at least it was funny for me, was early on it produced a set of discussion about the quality of coaching research and cited coaching research papers about the nature of coaching and these meta-analysis studies in Hypothesis 2. And it said a paper by Jonathan Passmore. That's very good. How does it know my work? And then I had to look at it more closely. It had completely made it up. It was in the right journal that I had published in. I had published papers that year. I had published papers on coaching clearly. So it knew all of those things. But this specific paper in this specific journal, when I went to look it up, it had entirely made it up, but it was very believable. When we sent it out to professors of coaching around the world, asking them to mark these papers, pretending they were student papers, most of them were marked as a pass, and the academics didn't spot the errors. They just assumed that the referencing was correct. They didn't think, it could be wrong. I need to check precisely this reference. So we need to be very careful when AI makes claims, when it quotes things, because it may have entirely made it up. So this is the idea of the Library of Babel. If any of you have come across this story, the Library of Babel is a library that contains a fictional library, a library that contains every book in the world in every language that's ever been written and whichever could be written. So each book contains a random set of letters. Now, amongst the trillions of books that it's produced, there will be some books that are complete nonsense, a few books that have got the odd word or sentence that make sense. And then amongst the trillions of books, there will be the complete works of Shakespeare, every Wordsworth's poem, every book that's ever been written, and of course, ever could be written. Now, the problem is all of these books are in a random order. So for those who are seeking knowledge, finding that becomes a lifetime's journey. The Library of Babel is what we're creating with AI. There will be so much content. The challenge for us will be discerning what is wisdom and what is twaddle and nonsense. So go and have a look at that paper if that's of interest. Next paper to share with you is some work that we did, Sandra Diller and I, looking specifically at AI and the AI revolution. And we were asking coaches about how they were feeling about it. Broadly, they said, hey, there's an existential threat. What are we going to do? And some people were saying, well, actually, the best thing that we could do is embrace technology and leverage it for ourselves for the best outcomes. So go and have a look at that paper. I won't dwell there. I'm going to talk a little bit about ethical considerations and a couple of studies. Then we're going to have a conversation, and then I'm going to go and jump on stage in 16 minutes time. So ethical considerations. I've talked a little bit about these, and some of us will know about the worries that you have or we should have when you're inputting prompts into generative AI, that it's learning from your input. So when you share something with it, it's no longer private unless you tick the privacy settings. Unless you're working with a specific gen tool like Copilot that has clear boundaries that prevent the information being disclosed more widely. But otherwise, a large language model is just soaking up everything you give it. So there are commercial privacy concerns, individual privacy concerns. Be careful what you give it. There are issues about IP. Now, I wrote this slide before Scarlett Johansson threatened to sue OpenAI after it produced its voice-driven product. And one of the voices that you could choose was called Sky. And Scarlett's team said, this sounds like Scarlett. Scarlett, did you record this? And she said, no, sue them. So Scarlett's lawyers wrote to OpenAI and they said, no, it isn't you. She said, I don't care. It sounds like me. People might think it's me. Please don't do it. They took it down. Now, OpenAI, she's very powerful. She's very rich. She could have sued them. But if you're putting anything on your website, maybe it's IP protected. It will have stolen it. It scrapes books, data, articles. All of my work has been scraped. How much do I get paid for that? From someone from OpenAI? Nothing. It's the Napsterization of knowledge. And we need to be very careful, and there might be issues and implications as we move forward. There's also issues, of course, about bias and ethical conduct. We have seen issues regarding, I'm trying to compete with a very loud background noise now. We've seen issues about question marks in relation to conduct and ethics, and the worry that AI tools have colluded with people committing suicide. We've seen issues of Nazi soldiers, but they were Black and Asian. This was from Google, I believe. So when it's been asked to produce, give us a sample of Nazi soldiers, it tried to overcorrect on diversity and resulted with bizarre images. So there are ethical considerations. Now, a couple of studies that I have done tried to compare AI with human coaching, which you might be interested. Both are currently in review stages and making their way through. The first of those looked at coach competences. And what we saw in that coach competency assessment was that coaches who, the AI bot was assessed as a very basic coach. It could coach, and it was assessed at a very basic level, but it wasn't so transactional, we might describe it as. It wasn't transformational. The sort of things that it had problem doing was holding the silence, creating a sense of presence, bringing humor into the conversation. And so that aspect, it was very mechanistic. It was like, here's the Grow model. I'll ask you a question. Summarized very well. It asked open questions. Fabulous. But it lacked that authenticity that an experienced, wise executive coach would bring in. The second study is the one we've called a Marmite study, where we had a look at comparing human and AI. What were the results? Well, the results told us that actually humans more than 90% of the time outperformed the AI coach, outperformed it in terms of insight on goal attainment, in terms of confidentiality and the perceptions of individuals' feelings of shame. So the human coach significantly was judged as better. And one of the reasons for this, in our view, is that simplistic approach that the AI coach was bringing into the conversations. Yes, it could coach, but it's like being coached by your 7-year-old as opposed by your 47-year-old. So it follows a script. It does all the sensible things that it's supposed to do, but it doesn't create that added value that at the moment the human is creating. Now, you might say, well, AI is learning quicker than you and me, and you're absolutely right. Will it surpass us? Probably. So there is a developmental journey, and what can we do to defend ourselves? Well, maybe some of the things that we can do is ensure that we focus on values, ensure that we bring our sense of humor and our experience into the coaching conversation, our authenticity. But I think fundamentally, the biggest difference that will remain is our ability to hold clients to account. And for example, I have a Henry Hoover at home. It's like one of these little things, it has a face on it, and you get the Hoover out, has a little name. You say, we'll get the Henry out and Hoover up the carpet because there's some fluff on it. We get it out. It's got a name. Yes, it does its job. And an AI tool might well do a job. It might well have a name. It might have a smiley little face. But I don't feel accountable to my Hoover. If the carpet is dirty, I don't feel guilty at not having hoovered. I'm not getting it out of the cupboard. And in that sense, I think it's important for us to ensure that we bring accountability into our coaching conversation. So let me stop at this point because they're calling people back after the break, and I'm going to need to go in about 5 minutes. So probably time for one question. And as I say, here are some of the references. And if you want to connect, again, here's that QR code. Vicky, over to you. One question I'm going to need to shoot, and you're going to need to, I know, move into a conversation with the group.
Right, who's got a question that they would like to pose to Jonathan? Anybody in particular? I have one if there's no. So my question, Jonathan, to you is how can we work together with AI? So,
I think it's a great question. I think the first thing that I am doing is using tools like Ovida for coaching supervision. Second thing that we can do is, with the consent of our client and full transparency, I can record the call. I can summarize the call through an AI bot. And that can help me to have an overview and a memory of what did we do last time in one paragraph, rather than reading the whole transcript or having to rely on my notes. I need to ensure that I put the security settings in. If I'm using Copilot and Microsoft Teams, that's not a problem. Other tools are beginning to put in place privacy settings, so your call isn't shared with the wider LLM. So those are two steps that I would take. For those who are more adventurous, you might want to write your own AI coach who works alongside you. So some of the larger platforms have done this to act as a integration with a human coach. And that's where I think the technology is at the moment, to be a nudger, a reminder, a space for short reflections, but not for long conversations. And so you could build an AI tool that your clients have access to as an intermediate session activity. So you do your coaching, then you do the engagement with the AI tool, then you come back to your next coaching session. And between those, you have your supervision, you review your transcript, and for your client, you get them to engage in a reflective practice with your AI coach bot. Those are 3 practical steps people could take away. And Vicky, I'm going to need to step out as we...
Thank you.
It's been lovely connecting with people. I'm really sorry that they've had a bit of background noise and you can still hear it. Hopefully you've managed to hear enough of what I was able to say. And it's been lovely connecting with you. And maybe I'll come back to Sydney and come and see you in person at some.
Thank you, Jonathan. And thank you for your insights and for your time. Really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Right. So Jonathan will go off. Right. Okay. So how we're going to move this discussion on from here is really to go into some breakout rooms. Anybody got something they'd like to share about what really emerged from your discussion? Anybody particular? Oh, I'm going to call on Tyler. Go, Tyler. Oh, there you are, Audrey. Okay.
Maybe the silence from everyone is because we didn't actually have an awful lot to report back, because we're not really using it in actively during, certainly not during a coaching session, beyond the occasional transcription. But we're all very open to using it as part of coach development with difficult case conceptualizations. And we were particularly taken with Jonathan's suggestions for the in-between main sessions.
Yes, we thought about that as well.
Do some automated check-ins. That would be very lovely. But I don't know how to create that.
Yeah, so reflection on that, we've got quite a bit of personal development ourselves as coaches, and that you could perhaps start using it in between practices. Thanks, Audrey. Thank you. Any other groups had a reflection?
Vicky and Matthew have hands up.
Yeah.
Vicky, I just put a question in the chat for everyone. Everyone loves this idea of between coaching sessions. I think some of us are experimenting in the coaching session, but we all love the idea of between coaching sessions. Is anyone using it? Does anyone know a product, an AI tool, anything that can do this automated nudging or scheduling of sessions, or anything that in between stuff that we do manually now? Anybody?
Apart from emails, I don't use chat. Anybody know how to use chat? I use emails, but that's not exactly revolutionary.
No, I mean, doing it automatic, that you can set it up and it contacts them, twice over the next 4 weeks to give them a nudge around their experiments or whatever.
Vicky, I believe there was a tool that the leadership, the TLC put out that supported in between, like when you're doing your 360 debriefs, for instance. I'm not sure whether it's still available. I'm not sure how well it got off the ground, but I do believe that at one point in time that was something, and it was very much doing that. So you could set it up to, like these are the key areas that I'm looking at developing, and then when you get the assistance from the manual, for instance, it would feed some of those key points, the action steps in there. But I'm not sure, as I said, where it's at now.
Who's TLC?
Leadership Circle.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
This might be a question we might pose to Jonathan. He might come up.
I think so. There's a mention there of Calendly, which can work quite well for virtual, but doesn't work if you're doing scheduling face-to-face stuff.
Good.
I can ask that
Matt,
question.
you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I thought
Matt,
we had some. Sure, we had some interesting conversations. Our group. We focused on how we can work with AI, how it can support us. Mel shared some interesting research that came from a Harvard Business Review article that talked about some of the trends in how people are using AI, and particularly how it's changed. And number one is therapy and companionship, followed by organizing my life and finding purpose. So really highlighted how some of those things that we feel like, people are more likely to come to a coach for, they're probably are using AI. And so just really, how can we start harnessing that more? We're looking at the moment in our organization around, we've got a wait list for some of our coaching services. So giving people some tools on how they can use AI as a basic initial chatbot to support them with some of that stuff, so that then the more detailed stuff that we can pick up, or the stuff that requires more skill set, we can pick up through our coaches. And then the other thing we started talking about was how in the future we can start to use it to aid us more. So love the idea of the co-pilot summarizing the meetings. One of the things I'm hoping for is the day where I can use one of those as kind of an assistant that can point out things like, this person's repeated this word 5 times, or even with team coaching, can start to give me some real data around number of interruptions, or, number of times that they've repeated a point, and some of that stuff that my brain doesn't pick up so quickly. And you often benefit from a co-coach, but actually using AI as your co-coach in that situation.
Yes. So it's actually assisting you to become a better coach. Excellent. Yeah. I know Paul was talking there about in Microsoft, there's certain functions in Microsoft that you can refer your client to, that is sort of these basic automated things that are probably easier for them to utilize through Microsoft. We seem to have lost Matt. Oh, there he is down the corner there. Yeah. Great. Okay, we've got something here from Ty. Ty, do you want to talk to that?
Having a look at that, Vicky, I just wanted to add to Matt's point. As critical thinkers and professionals, where is that data being stored? How do we ensure privacy? How are we contracting with our clients that they are in agreement with, or not, that their information is being stored or used for other purposes, even if it's our own reflections and training? That's the only other point I wanted to add.
Yes, excellent. And Ty's put in the chat function.
It looks like there are
if you could just talk
tools.
to that, Ty.
It looks like there are a few tools out there, and I think it's a little bit meta, a little bit fun to use things like ChatGPT to find other technology. So I guess it was one of the points that I wanted to make with our group is that as coaches now, we need to stay abreast of all of the technologies and the opportunities through technology, not just the evolution of coaching theories and practices. We have to be tech savvy if we're going to stay relevant and be able to compete with people who are au fait with all of the tech, because it can add a lot of value if you know how to harness it, and you can be open and transparent and frame the conversation right and have the confidence that you can also manage and maintain the security and privacy aspect. It's a lot. It's a lot more for us to take on as coaches.
Great. Any other reflections before I hand over? One thing we did talk about in our group was accessibility. I thought that was a really important point that Jonathan made, you know, that in terms of democratization of coaching, you know, people who normally would not have access to coaching. It's the same with education. And I gave an example coming from developing country, how important it is for people maybe sitting in a village to access this type of thing, while, you know, it wouldn't be like us providing it. It would be some form of coaching. So, all right. So I'm going to hand over to Olivia to close off. And thank you very much. And I hope that this has stimulated your mind. And as Tyler says, we're moving forward, and we're just going to really have to take this on, aren't we, Audrey, and develop ourselves. Yeah. Over to you, Olivia.
Fabulous. Thank you, Vicky. And thank you all for your participation tonight. It was fabulous to have Jonathan come and speak with us. I just wanted to give a plug, I suppose, to some upcoming events. For those of you who may not be aware, we have what we call a leader coach circle, of which Tyler's one of our leads. He's on tonight's call. This is a bi-monthly virtual event designed by leader coaches for leader coaches, and that is, and I can hear potentially some people through your questions that might include some of the people on tonight's call, and they are coaches who work in organisations and use a coaching approach. So the next catch up is the 21st of May. We've also got our very engaging Come As You Are informal networking virtual connection. So that's monthly, and that's coming up on the 23rd of May. And we also have Research to Practice. That's probably another one I'd call out, on the 17th of June. So that's the equivalent of our journal club. Again, a great opportunity to connect and learn together with some great evidence-based research articles. What we're starting to do more and more is reward and recognise those members and non-members that we're seeing coming along that may be new, or that might be interested in some other events that are coming up, and we'd like to recognise and reward their support. He's just left the call, but Stephen Berkeley, we wanted to gift Stephen Berkeley, as part of our Lucky Door prize this evening, a Discovery Series ticket. So we've got our next big Discovery Series event, which is a global thought leader, similar to tonight's call. Speaker still TBC, but the one that is in italics at the moment is a really exciting and prominent speaker who's just launched a new book on listening. There's your big clue. And that'll be in October. So I'll get in contact with Stephen to gift him that event. That's all from me, Vicky. Thanks very much. Okay. Well, we might have lost Vicky. So
Vicky,
we might
you're on
say,
mute. She was on mute.
there. Thank you.
Right, you know, the traditional thing, I've left it on mute. So thanks everybody, and
Thank you
for attending, and I hope it stimulated you thinking about your role as a coach and how to work with AI. And we look forward to seeing you at one of the events that Olivia has shared with you. Thanks so much. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Vicky.